Here comes the bride. Today we are talking about brides. Well, one bride, the bride of Christ, his church. The church today is at a hidden crossroads. According to a recent survey conducted by the Center for Biblical Worldview, less than 50% of senior pastors have a biblical worldview, and less than 15% of youth pastors have a biblical worldview. Churches are not placing the truth of the Bible as the center point of ministry. Today, pastor and Northern Irishman Jamie Bambrick join us on the Biblical Worldview show. Jamie is famous for his He Saves Us Super Bowl commercial, and he is the editor-in-chief of Clear Truth Media. Let's look at life through the lens of Scripture. You're watching the Biblical Worldview show, a ministry of RenewaNation. Well, welcome to the Biblical Worldview show, where we have gone international, all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to bring in Mr. Jamie Bambrick, the editor-in-chief. We have a chief among us, the editor-in-chief of Clear Truth Media. Jamie, thank you so much for your willingness to be on the show. We're so glad you're here.
Oh, thank you for having me, and pleasure to be here once again.
Now, Ireland and Northern Ireland as well, though I may not be correct on Northern Ireland, but I do know the island of Ireland has amazing golf courses, and you do not play golf. So as we begin, I want you to account for the total squandering of this amazing opportunity to be a great golfer. Isn't that a requirement for Irishmen?
It's, it is. If there was a sort of per capita best country in the world at golf, I think we would be that. Unfortunately, golf is also boring, and therefore I don't want to do that with my time. I would rather play an actual sport that involves running, like football, like with your feet football. Although actually, American football, I do enjoy watching. We don't get to play it much here, and I also played rugby, so I was not a golfer. And I probably just don't have the patience. I would be a sort of Happy Gilmore early stages throwing clubs is what you would get if I attempted to take that up in any serious fashion.
Jamie Bambrick engendering himself to probably almost everyone watching by calling golf not a sport, except for me. I like golf. I enjoy it, and I hope to go to Ireland and Northern Ireland and Scotland one day to play some of your great courses over there. But let's get down to business. Churches are headed in the wrong direction, some of them, and some of them are very much headed in the right direction. And I'm a big fan. I'm just going to say, I do believe that churches are in a crossroads. And I think that there was some really good things that a guy named Tim Keller brought to the table. And anyone that knows me well knows that I love New York City. And Jamie, I have been in like parks in New York City and randomly had gospel conversations with members of Tim Keller's church that I thought were like trained apologists. They were so good with there was an equipping that Redeemer Presbyterian was doing that I don't think people may give credit to. But there was also a mentality that kind of shifted towards the end of Keller's life that you have to concede some of these things to be effective in evangelism. And that just isn't true. And I think we have to be careful as to what we concede. And I don't know, do you sense a danger where people feel like the only way we can advance the kingdom is by, to some degree, being dishonest about what we believe, or maybe even conceding to untrue things for this greater purpose of kingdom advancement? Do you see that happening sometimes?
Yes. I think there's an issue with the term gospel centered, right? Which, if you think about the Gospel Coalition, if you think about a lot of that movement that Keller and people like him have been part of, and that he was influential in
I know I'm
building.
not supposed to interrupt, but Jamie,
No,
you
go for it.
nailed it. This is like one of my pet peeves, the word gospel centered. And I know you're going to take a rant, but I could not agree more. Keep going.
Yes, yeah. So there's issues. It depends a little bit how you define the term gospel, right? Because there's two ways you can take it. You can go the sort of very like a narrower version of the gospel, which is the death, resurrection of Jesus Christ, faith in Him, salvation through that means alone, right? And that's very good, and that is a good thing, and we want to be centered around that. One of the interesting things that started happening though was that definition ended up getting expanded, and often gets expanded, where we hear that a lot of the socially liberal movements of the day are gospel issues. So race is a gospel issue. The environment, I heard someone today talk about the environment is a gospel issue. And you go, right, you can have a broader definition of gospel, which is the kingdom, like the gospel of the kingdom. So it depends a little bit how you want to position the term gospel. But I think there is an issue with that definition, because what that can mean is if you just make it the narrower version, then you narrow everything down and you say, well, that's the only thing that matters. And therefore, kind of on everything else doesn't really matter at all, because that's not the gospel. And that's a problem, because actually the Bible is not just that individual message of Christ's death and resurrection. It is the core message. It is the center, but the center of what? What is it the center of, right? Because you have all of this stuff around it. That's the hub, you could say. But you have things, so you actually are called to, the church is called to speak into other issues. Now, if you take, no, so that's one way in which I have a problem with it. The other one is that if you take a broader understanding of gospel and you think about the gospel as being the rule and reign of Christ, a guy called Joe Boot in a wonderful book called The Mission of God, which is a big, thick, meaty textbook that I highly recommend everybody taking the time to read, because it is very good. He has a broader definition. But if you go that way, well, then the gospel isn't just some socially liberal thing either, right? So in neither paradigm of quote unquote the gospel and how you define it does putting in a whole bunch of other issues work, and neither actually should neither permits you to compromise or engage in sin in order to quote unquote be gospel centered. Both of those would rule that out if you correctly understand it. But so it was such an easy term that everybody got to use it however they wanted, put whatever they want under that bracket. This is the gospel. That's not the gospel. So my social issue is the gospel, but that one's not the gospel. And it's not actually a helpful term, I think, no matter what way you define it.
The Biblical Worldview show is called such. The term biblical worldview is not in the Bible. I certainly think the concept is, but I am fine if one day the term biblical worldview becomes problematic. What will never become problematic is by centering your theology on the Bible. And that is where gospel-centered was able to basically subjectively allow people to define what was important and what was not subjectively. And that to me is very dangerous. I literally heard a pastor yesterday. I was on Twitter and he said everybody needs or every pastor needs a philosophy of ministry. Here's mine. It was 3 paragraphs, Jamie, and not one time was there any reference to the Bible or instruction in the Bible. And I'm like, well, the Bible is central. And so when we say things like the gospel is central, to me what that means is I get to subjectively choose what is central, what is important. And I feel like, that's incredibly dangerous. Do you think that there are important issues that aren't being addressed by churches but need to be?
Yeah, for sure. And again, it'll depend on what church you're in. But the church has, I think, um, very much caved on some of the issues of the day. Now, I think some of them have started to wake up a little bit. I do think there's a turning of the tide going on. I think some of the real excesses of, say, transgenderism have caused churches to go, goodness, that slippery slope was very real.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to talk about it until 2014, 2015. But suddenly we now realize, actually, do you know what? This is a real problem and we need to deal with it. And we need to speak about it. So some are recognizing that, but many have been far too silent. I think, the number one issue here at the moment that I think the church does need to get a grasp on and speak about is the issue of mass immigration. I really think that is an issue. We are told time and time again that the only Christian response is basically open borders, and you hear that so much with the sort of Keller acolyte third way guys. They'll go, well, look, we agree with the Republicans on the pro-life issue, but we agree with the Democrats on loving our foreign neighbor, or whatever term. It's like, right, well, what about what about loving the neighbor that lives here, that doesn't necessarily want all the world's criminals coming in and living beside them? I think that is a real issue that the church does actually need to start addressing and thinking about more biblically, because it is actually one of the top priorities. Certainly in the UK, we've got an election coming up on your Independence Day, the day you guys got away, and we'll take the colonies back anytime. If you feel like you've made a mistake, you can return to the fold. But 4th of July, we have elections, and that is the number one issue, because what we've seen is that people are being radically impoverished. Crime levels are going up. The country's services can't accommodate that many people. I think that's a real issue, and that'd be one I would put under that bracket of one of the ones that the church actually should be speaking into at this point in time.
Excellent. More with Jamie Bambrick when we come back. And it's really nice to even get a global perspective of the issues that the church is facing. And looking forward to more after this break. The Biblical Worldview Show is a ministry of RenewaNation in partnership with the Center for Truth and Love. We are supported by faithful partners who want to invest in life-saving and life-changing kingdom impact. If the show is helpful to you, you can support us by subscribing, following, and sharing. You also can support us through giving. Make a tax-deductible financial investment today at RenewaNation.org. Our culture is increasing in skepticism. Therefore, they want scientific verification and increased evidences. And when you look at the gospel is certainly entered into by faith, but many believers refuse to even give the evidence that underpins the gospel. This is contrary to the command in 1 Peter 3:15 to always be ready to give an answer, and the subsequent verses, which say that the answer should be so effective that those that challenge the Christian faith should be somewhat embarrassed that they would raise the objection because the answer is so good. Most believers are not equipped to fulfill this command. And so we wanted to create a resource that would cover the most basic objections to the Christian faith and provide evidence that the believer can offer. Does God exist? Is the Bible reliable? Why does God allow evil? And did Jesus rise from the dead? Those are the 4 objections that cover the scope of the gospel and that you'll find in our Gospel Evidences resource. I'm very excited about this. And we are back with Northern Irishman Jamie Bambrick as the Biblical Worldview Show goes international. Jamie, an acclaimed non-golfer, gives us more insight. Have you ever played before, Jamie? Just out of curiosity.
I mean, played is a strong term for what I did. I have used golf clubs in a golf setting with a ball. So yes, technically yes.
All right. So in the break, we discussed, and I want to paint a scenario for you and get your feedback on it. I actually do. I don't know if you know this. I try to go to New York City and just have on the street conversations that we video from time to time, and it's really fun. And you just learn so much about people doing that. And I remember I was in Madison Square Park. Actually, speaking of sports, the place baseball was invented. And I was sitting with this young man on a bench, and we were talking, and he said Jamie, he was at a level of frustration that was shocking to me. And he was very open. He goes, "Look, I'm not gay, but I don't hate gay people." He goes, "I'm a man, and I don't hate women." He goes, "I'm white, and I don't hate black people. But it seems like no matter what I do, I'm a racist, bigoted homophobe." And this guy was not a Christian. And he's like, I don't know how to accommodate any of this. And he was so frustrated. And I believe, and you mentioned this in the break, I believe that is an incredible mission field that we are overlooking. As many in the church think that the church will grow by leaning into those issues, I think there's a young man that you can open the Bible to and go, actually, there's a man and a woman. Actually, God doesn't find the solution to partiality in more partiality. We are one race and one blood. So I don't know, in the break, you kind of mentioned some of that. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that frustration that I think exists with even unevangelized conservatives.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think one thing that we need to be hopeful about as Christians is that the devil always overplays his hand. The devil is cunning, but he is also a fool. The fool says in his heart, "There is no God." The fool, he is not wise, and so whilst he has very deceptive sounding arguments, that he often makes mistakes, and I do view that as all of what's going on as a spiritual war, and I think we're starting to see that actually. The devil doesn't know when to quit and doesn't know when to stop pushing the ideology to the extremes that people start to wake up. If he had stopped where he was at 10 years ago, I think things would have trundled along fairly nicely in that regard. But I think people are waking up. There's an interesting article actually in a former Christian magazine, Christianity Today, still a magazine, but no longer a Christian one. But nonetheless, they do have an interesting graph where they track people identifying as nuns, as in Nones, so irreligious, of no religion in particular. And what's interesting is if you look at the graph for men, the very youngest cohort of men, those aged between 18 and 25, the number of people identifying as having no religion is actually going down among young men. Young men are becoming more religious. That very youngest cohort that has come through, that as very much like that man described, you cannot. The secular message that is out there offers no hope, no forgiveness, no salvation. Does not give someone who is in the wrong category. Doesn't give anybody, but particularly it's relevant to those who are in the wrong categories, straight white guy, right? Gives them no hope at all of salvation. You will never be rid of your privilege. And so there is a massive amount of people out there who are looking for answers. They're looking for people to speak, to quote the name of my own organization that I'm now for, speak clear truth on these issues, to get the ideas right and to give them what the truth is, to outline these things from a true and clear perspective, which happens to be the Bible, because the Bible is completely true. At the minute, what we're seeing is a lot of people are turning to take the more positive and then the much less positive, but they're turning to folks like Jordan Peterson, who I don't view as a Christian, but I think he is a more positive figure, and certainly a lot more positive than the average that's out there. And then the more negative would be an Andrew Tate. Both of the reasons, or the reason why both of those guys have some pulling power, is that they are saying true things on some of these issues, and they're reaching people that look like that. The fact of the matter is, The church actually has a better answer than either of those guys.
Yes.
The church also has eternal salvation on offer, but even the wisdom of the church, the practical wisdom of the church, is better than either of them can offer, because Scripture, again, is divinely inspired. It is written by the creator of all of this stuff. And if we will just stop worrying about offending the occasional hardcore leftist and teach truth on these issues that matter, there is an enormous amount of people. I'm talking millions and millions and millions
Amen.
of people who are waking up to just how destructive this ideology is, and they're looking for an answer.
Amen. Yes. And if you feel a little disheartened, can I tell you that is one of the reasons I wanted Jamie Bambrick on here, is because of the project that he is working on with Clear Truth Media. So a few weeks ago, I get a call or a message from the managing editor of the Babylon Bee, a guy named Joel Berry, and he's like, man, I want to tell you about what we're doing. And so another pastor named Stephen Whitlow and him got on a phone and was like, hey, we're doing this. And like a week later, I'm on this call with men and a few ladies from all over the world, mostly in the United States, who are waking up to this fact and are going, Christianity Today is no longer a Christian magazine. The Gospel Coalition is not offering Bible precepts in the way they once were. Where do we turn? And that is Clear Truth Media. It's actually launching July 1st. And so when you're watching this, it's a place where you can go for articles and for resources. And we hope that the Biblical Worldview Show is a place that you'll come. But some of these articles are going to be absolutely phenomenal. So, Jamie, tell us a little bit about Clear Truth as we end, where people can find it, and then maybe some of your own videos that are released in other places too, which I love. I love watching Jamie Bambrick videos. They really are just solid biblical worldview training resources. So thanks for being on the show. And yeah, tell us how we can find out more about Clear Truth.
Super. Thank you very much. Yes, cleartruthmedia.com. So we'll be launching on the 1st of July, which is after recording, possibly before release, which is wonderful. So if it's after the 1st of July, if you're watching this anytime after that point, probably in the next 100 years, I imagine. I don't know if we'll still be going at that point. But if you're watching it sometime in the reasonably near future, that's where you can go and check out all of that stuff. Yeah, we have an incredible, what I've been so blessed and struck by is just the amount of quality people, and include yourself very much in that, but some of the other names you mentioned, a whole bunch of other incredible contributors who recognize the need that the church has to speak into these issues, and a willingness to do so together, to cross some of those, secondary issues. Yes, we can have lots of disagreement, and yes, we can actually air those disagreements in a respectful manner, but actually there's a battle to be fought, there's ground to be taken, and we think, I believe, by the grace of God, with the people that we have, we can make a real dent. I'm really convinced that we can start this thing strong, and we can shift the mood and shift the theology of the church in a more healthy direction to speak to the age that we're in. So please check out all of our stuff, all the social media platforms of any note. We should be on there. And if you want to see my stuff, by all means, check out my name as well. Twitter and YouTube are the main places where I post.
Jamie Bambrick, thank you so much for joining us. Definitely check out Clear Truth Media. But if you have not yet been on RenewaNation's website, definitely go and check out the many incredible ministries of RenewaNation. Subscribe to the Biblical Worldview Show. Share it. Share this episode with a friend. I think it could be incredibly helpful to you. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Ben Shetler. This is the Biblical Worldview Show, a ministry of RenewaNation. Until next time. Hey, you're still here. Thank you so much for watching the Biblical Worldview Show. Our show is supported by financial investments from viewers just like you. If you'd like to make a donation to the Biblical Worldview Show, you can do so by going to RenewaNation.org. And don't forget to subscribe and follow our show.